Hello everyone and welcome to the WRA interview. My name is Sandil Sandmagam and I am the Project Director for Europe for the World Refining Association. So for those of you who are not familiar with our work, the WRA specializes in bringing the refining community together through conferences, board meetings and now virtual conversations. We're involved in Latin America, the Middle East, Asia and of course Europe. COVID-19 has generated both social and economic uncertainty. And given that many of our network are still in lockdown, we thought it would be great to provide you some industry insights whilst at home. Today I have with me Kim Jooste, who is the VP for Downstream Projects and Technology at MOL Group. Kim is responsible for assuring the safe, reliable operations of the MOL Group's downstream assets, driving future efficiency improvements and the development of strategic projects to achieve the MOL Group 2030 Enter Tomorrow strategy. Kim started her career in South Africa at Sastec, the technical division of Sasol, and previously worked for Shell Downstream for 24 years in various roles, including technology, operations, commercial, new business development, projects, and strategy. There's a lot there. Now, this year, Kim was also inducted into our top 275 female executives in the energy industry. So congratulations to you, Kim. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I think this lockdown situation has been very good for my department and we've actually thrived under these conditions.
Oh, I look forward to hearing about how we can discuss this further, how you're thriving. But is there any piece of advice for any of our listeners or about how you're approaching the lockdown?
Well, my own personal advice would just be, really care for your people and trust them implicitly. And don't forget to care for yourself and ensure that you have a little bit of exercise somewhere in these lockdown situations, because you can easily fall into the trap of sitting behind your computer all day long.
That is very true. And so I thought we might as well get started and go into the technical side and show why you're making these executive decisions at the top 275 women in energy. I wanted to understand, how is the COVID-19 impact affecting MOL Group at the moment in the short and medium? Could you give us some more insights into that?
Of course I can. The pandemic and consequently current global economic crisis are already affecting half of the world's population. And this is the first time in world history that we are facing a crisis of this kind, where both decline and in demand and multitude of supply at present is all going wrong at the same time. Therefore, it affects us in MOL as well. Our top priority is the health and safety of our employees. And in the past few months, we have implemented many preventative measures to minimize the physical presence of our employees at the sites. And home office has been a big thing. We've allowed masks and gloves at the sites, and we've even started a new product line with disinfectants. We have also been a forerunner in the oil and gas sector, I believe, in being able to introduce the tests for our employees on the sites in the countries where it is legally possible to do so. And for now, we've done more than 13,000 tests on all our employees in Slovakia and Hungary, and we will continue to apply preventative measures in a further way. With the dramatic oil price drop in refining, and the petchem margins actually grew, but on the other hand, we saw a heavy drop in demand, and with our core market fuel demand declining by about 30 to 35% on average. But with the most recent developments, after having historical negative crude prices in the US futures, as you know, the crude is up again, but refinery margins have declined. So we're dealing with an extreme volatility as we speak. And we've just had to continue adapting our output in line with the weaker demand and then with the slightly stronger demand as the lockdowns are starting to ease in our key countries. And we're just continuing to be as flexible as possible at present. Our steam crackers have actually been maintained at around 90% capacity throughout this whole period, so that's been good. And we still do not know how the pandemic situation will look in autumn and how long it will take for governments to fully recall the measures. And we know that it will not be an overnight recovery, and it will probably happen in phases. We can expect that the crude prices will remain low and volatile, and it's way too early to really predict when that demand is actually going to recover.
And when you're looking at the long term, has that MOL Group strategy changed, or have you been able to maintain that long term and you're just addressing the short term issues right now?
Well, surviving circumstances is not a new subject for the oil industry, but it's in this extent for the whole world exactly is quite unique. The impacts will most certainly be felt for, I think, the next 1 to 3 years, and we need to be prepared for this. So yes, it's a challenge to be focused on business continuity and to think about the long term at the same time. But I am happy to say that some of my teams have been able to continue focusing on the development work in their area. But business continuity has been the focus. So we've had to implement, just like the rest of the oil and gas companies, have a number of different financial measures which have impacted our OPEX as well as our CAPEX. However, having in mind that the future will not wait when considering capital investments, whilst we have postponed and reduced a number of our projects, we are doing our best to maintain those that are of strategic importance to us, such as our polyol project as an example.
And you mentioned this earlier about how you're approaching COVID, but the maintenance schedules, how have they been affected?
Like other EU refineries, we have made decisions to postpone our turnarounds. Only the smaller scale maintenance works are now ongoing due to the preventative measures in the coronavirus situation and having to also minimize the number of staff we want to keep on the sites. So maintenance work requires an increasing the number of people to be present, and we need to just maintain that distancing policy for a little bit longer. But I do need to emphasize that maintenance related to process and people safety remains a priority for us, and that those have not been postponed.
Now, when we look ahead after Corona happens, how are MOL Group assessing the potential changes in our behaviors and our habits? Will that change after the crisis, and could that affect what your company is going to be producing?
The crisis is showing us quickly how our habits can change, and it's reasonable to believe that the world might be changed forever. But we are also people that don't change that easily, so it will be interesting to see. I do believe that preventative measures will for sure stay with us, and with it, consumer habits will consider certainly being a much safer way of doing things. And I will for sure do more online buying for now. I just feel much safer doing that than walking into a crowded store. This might change trends longer term, and we already noticed different habits regarding carpooling, bike usage, and even the use of public transport is now seen more as a not so cool thing to do anymore. This all happens at the same time when the oil and gas industry is anyhow in the process of transformation and where the energy transition is beginning. So it will be interesting.
So you mentioned the energy transition. Do you think that because of these changes, it speeds up the strategy that many refineries are doing to reducing their CO2 emissions?
It might have an effect on the transition, but this will depend on the development of the situation in the economy and how the pandemic and the politics and the governments all want to apply this within the EU. For us, the MOL Strategy 2030 in Downstream still focuses on the transformation from fossil-based motor fuels, with the plans to enhance flexibility in refining by reducing the current motor fuel yield from about 70% plus to closer to 50% by 2030. And while this will be done mostly through higher petchem feedstock options, MOL will also raise the yield of the high-value fuel products, for example, aromatics, LPG, the base oils and waxes. And the key just remains we need to diversify our portfolio.
And so when you look at that, do you still foresee your refinery achieving the reduction targets in the current climate, or has the current climate delayed the prospects of that? I know the 2030 strategy is there, but has it delayed it at all?
CO2 emissions we've seen it, they've fallen sharply during this crisis, but such a trend, I believe, is temporary. We still need to focus on implementing policies, improving the energy efficiency, and to consider changes to our technologies to achieve the longer term goals. And it requires a lot of investment from the company, and it requires a strategic transformation as such. It's not an easy task, and it's too early to say whether there will be delays or how long this crisis is going to last and how it will impact us.
And when you mentioned about the government earlier and the politics, we were discussing at our advisory board about the Commission's Green Deal. Do you think it is going to be able to hold itself up in light of COVID's impact on governmental budgets?
I believe the Commission would be better placed to answer this question.
That's not a bad point yet.
But all I can say is COVID-19 has not made it any easier for anybody or any other body to make a decision on this.
I thought I would end this section with a hard question. That's all I thought I'd see. But then the where I'd like to move on to now is technology. And that's your area of expertise, of course. So from a technology perspective, which areas are MOL really looking to focus on? Yeah. And why do you think this technology is providing the biggest ROI?
Besides the traditional gas and power midstreams, we're mainly seeking opportunities in areas of mobility, chemicals, biofuels, and renewables. If we want to continue our journey in the petchem industry, we should also invest in the circular economy, for example, recycling. One of our best examples of ROI is actually MOL Limo, not necessarily a technology, diversified concept though. So it's a Budapest-based car sharing service providing clean urban transport solutions in the form of electric vehicles, but also better car utilization. In October 31, last year, we acquired Aurora. It's a German-based compounder company. This aids MOL in strengthening its presence in the recycled, sustainable compounding segment and in the automotive supplier industry. Aurora has a unique and lean closed-loop concept, including the collection, regrinding, and compounding of post-industrial plastic waste. And by combining MOL's extensive experience and Aurora's exceptional recycle-based compounding know-how, the long-term objective is to accelerate further market growth while relieving the burden on the environment. We also operate a rubber bitumen plant based on internally developed technology. It's an extraordinary road construction material utilizing bitumen and rubber granulate obtained from used rubber tires. And then we have recently entered the solar power business. We are building photovoltaic power plants in 3 of our main industrial sites in Hungary. And the solar plants are expected to reduce 9,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year compared to conventional energy sources. We are also exploring many other technologies, but for now it's too early to share any of that information with you.
And with all of these projects, I wondered the role of digitalisation. How much are you seeing that playing a role in the long run?
Well, digitalization has improved dramatically since the crisis and will remain a priority. So I think that's been one of the big benefits of this whole crisis.
And this comes from our advisory board again, where we mentioned 3 potential avenues and technologies of increasing hydrogen production, chemical recycling, and I suppose CCUS links to hydrogen. Which of these do you think will play the biggest role in long-term sustainability of refineries?
I believe all elements that you mentioned will play a role in the future. The importance will differ by company and by region. It's important to know that there's just going to be no silver bullet as one single best solution to our global energy problem. Hydrogen for us is interesting as an alternative fuel, especially as transport accounts for about 1/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, and a special potential for the utilization of hydrogen technologies in transport exists in the cities, which are currently located on the core network corridors of the Trans-European Transport Network. And then the CCUS also has its potential, although they are different, and with the decades of experience in EOR, it could also be a good direction for oil and gas companies. Both of these directions will, however, demand strategic decisions for the companies and have to be profitable. Our biggest investment so far in diversification has been the polyol project. And polyol, belonging to the polyurethanes value chain, is the second biggest and dynamically growing derivative of propylene. It is used in automotive, packaging, construction, furniture, and bedding industries. And it's an attractive investment for MOL, with significantly more opportunities for specialties in polyolefins that the company currently produces. And then in 2018, the company already secured all the technological licenses for a 200 KT per annum polyol project. This is the single largest investment that MOL has made in a number of years. And once the polyol plant starts, we expect to become the largest polyol producer in the CEE region, and also to be a significant player within Europe.
Thank you for that answer. And the final question I have is actually just about a regulation that has been overshadowed slightly by the coronavirus outbreak, and that's IMO 2020. Could you tell us more about the steps that MOL Group are taking in adapting to IMO, even though it's come in earlier this year?
Yes, so we have two landlocked refineries. So our Danube and Bratislava refineries have no material fuel oil output. So we actually see more of an upside thanks to the IMO 2020 regulation. Yeah. We do, of course, have an impact on our Rijeka refinery in Inna, which produces a certain amount of heavy fuel oil. And the company has already implemented strategies to reduce our high sulfur fuel oil production by switching crudes to lighter crudes, obviously, and also by importing vacuum gas oil. And then in December last year, we also approved the delayed coker project, which will then in the long run completely stop our heavy oil production.
Okay, thank you. Well, those are all the questions I have, but is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think that is it, but thanks for the opportunity to have been able to share our views with you.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and we will catch up soon once the lockdown is over.
Okay, great. Looking forward to that.